The stars were dying, and nobody knew how to stop it. Captain Dae-hyun stood on the bridge of the UES Indomitable, watching the emergency broadcast for the 5th time. The hologram showed a crystalline being with too many arms and eyes that glowed, like blue fire. Its voice carried pain that made his chest hurt. "People of the galaxy," the alien said, its words translated into rough Korean by the ship's computer. "We are the Veltari of the Crystal Worlds. Our home burns. Our children scream as the metal beasts tear them apart. We have fought for 300 cycles. We are losing." The image changed to show a planet covered in silver machines. They moved like ants, but each one was the size of a building. They ate everything: rocks, trees, cities, people. Where they passed, only more machines remained. "The Devourers consume all," the alien continued. "They turn our worlds into factories that make more of themselves. We have lost 17 star systems. The Nethian cloud people have lost 12. The Zephyrian hives have gone silent. Soon nothing will remain but metal and hunger." Dae-hyun had seen the reports. The galaxy's greatest civilizations were running scared. These were species that could move stars and build planets. They had weapons that could crack moons in half, but somehow they could not stop simple machines. "We call to any who can hear this message," the Veltari said. "Please help us. We offer all our knowledge, all our wealth, all our friendship. We only ask that you save what remains of life in this galaxy." The message ended. Dae-hyun's bridge crew looked at him with worried faces. They all knew what this meant. Earth had been watching the Devourer crisis for months, but the Galactic Council had made their position clear. Humans were not welcome. "Sir," said Communications Officer Jin A., "we're getting signals from the other colonies. Mars Command wants to know what we're going to do." Dae-hyun touched the control panel and opened a channel to Earth. The face that appeared belonged to Admiral Soo-jin, a woman with gray hair and scars from the colony wars. She looked tired, but determined. "You've seen the broadcast," she said without greeting. "Every human ship in the fleet has picked it up. What do you think, Captain?" "I think they're desperate," Dae-hyun replied. "The Veltari never ask for help. They think other species are too primitive to understand their technology. For them to beg like this, the situation must be worse than the reports suggest," Soo-jin finished. "Intelligence says the Devourers have adapted to every weapon the galaxy has used against them. Plasma cannons, gravity bombs, quantum disruptors. Nothing works for long." Dae-hyun nodded. He had read the same files. The machines were simple but clever. They studied their enemies and changed themselves to be immune to whatever killed them. After 300 years of war, they had become almost impossible to destroy. "Admiral," he said carefully, "what if we helped them?" Soo-jin was quiet for a moment. "The Galactic Council has made it clear that humans are not part of their civilization. They call us Deathworlders. They say we're too violent, too unpredictable. They've kept us locked in our own solar system for 50 years. "But they're dying," said Dae-hyun. "All of them. If the Devourers win, there won't be a galaxy left to exclude us from—" "I know." Soo-jin's face showed the weight of command. "I've been thinking the same thing, but we have to be realistic. Our fleet is small compared to theirs. We have maybe 2,000 ships total. They have millions." "Numbers aren't everything," Dae-hyun said. "The Veltari broadcast showed their battle tactics. They fight like they're in a chess game. Careful, planned, logical." "Maybe that's the problem." Soo-jin raised an eyebrow. "Explain." "Earth is a death world, Admiral. We didn't evolve on some peaceful garden planet like they did. We had to fight everything: the weather, the animals, each other. We learned to adapt, to improvise, to take crazy risks when we had to. You think our chaotic nature might be an advantage? I think," Dae-hyun said slowly, "that these machines have been fighting the same kind of enemy for 3 centuries. They know how to beat careful, logical opponents, but they've never fought someone who makes it up as they go along." Soo-jin considered this. Through the view screen behind her, Dae-hyun could see Earth's blue oceans and white clouds. It looked peaceful from space, but he knew better. That planet had tried to kill humanity every day for millions of years. Ice ages, volcanic eruptions, plague, famine, war, and somehow humans had survived it all. "There's something else," Soo-jin said. "Our scientists have been studying the devourer patterns. Dr. Hai-won thinks she's found something interesting." The Admiral's image moved aside, and a new face appeared. Dr. Hai-won looked young, but her eyes were sharp and focused. She had been humanity's lead expert on alien biology since the first contact with the Veltari. "Captain," she said, "I've been analyzing every battle report from the last year. The Devourers aren't just random killing machines. They have patterns, strategies, even what you might call preferences." "What kind of preferences?" Dae-hyun asked. "They always try to preserve themselves. Every tactical decision is based on minimizing their own losses while maximizing damage to the enemy. It's perfectly logical from a machine perspective. But it means they can't handle opponents who don't follow the same logic. Every species they've fought has been defensive, trying to protect their worlds and people. The machines adapted to that. They expect their enemies to retreat when the cost becomes too high." Dae-hyun felt something click in his mind. "They've never fought anyone who attacks harder when they're losing." "Exactly," Dr. Hai-won smiled grimly. "Humans have a saying about cornered animals being the most dangerous. The Devourers have no programming for that concept." Admiral Soo-jin returned to the screen. "So the question becomes, are we willing to bet the survival of our species on the chance that human stubbornness can succeed where galactic superpowers have failed?" Dae-hyun looked around his bridge. His crew was listening to every word, their faces showing a mixture of fear and excitement. These were people who had volunteered to serve on the frontier, knowing they might never see Earth again. They understood risk. "Admiral," he said, "with respect, we're already betting our survival. If the Devourers win, they'll come for us eventually. Better to fight them now, while there are still allies left to fight beside. And if the Galactic Council refuses our help, if they shoot at us for entering their space, then we'll deal with that problem when we get to it." Dae-hyun's voice was firm. "That's what humans do." Soo-jin nodded slowly. "I was hoping you'd say that. Stand by for new orders, Captain. We're about to find out if Deathworlders can teach the galaxy how to fight." The transmission ended, leaving Dae-hyun alone with his thoughts. Outside the viewports, space looked empty and peaceful. But somewhere in that darkness, machines were eating worlds and turning them into more machines. The galaxy was crying for help, and nobody else was answering. Time for the Deathworlders to show what they could do. Admiral Soo-jin walked into the largest meeting room on Luna Base, where the emergency session of the United Earth Defense Council was already in progress. The 12 most important military leaders in human space sat around a circular table, their faces showing worry and determination in equal measure. "Ladies and gentlemen," Soo-jin said as she took her seat, "we all know why we're here. The galaxy is dying, and we have to decide whether humanity will help save it." General Woo-bin, commander of the Marine Corps, spoke first. "Admiral, with all due respect, we're talking about fighting an enemy that has defeated civilizations millions of years ahead of us. The Veltari can reshape matter with their thoughts. The Nathians exist as living gas clouds that can pass through solid matter. If they can't stop these machines, what makes us think we can?" Admiral Soo-jin turned to the woman sitting across from her. "Dr. Hai-won, would you explain what you've discovered about the Devourer tactics?" Dr. Hai-won stood up and activated the holographic display in the center of the table. It showed a three-dimensional map of the galaxy with red areas marking Devourer-controlled space. "The pattern is clear," she said. "The Devourers attack the same way every time. They send scout units to study the target's defenses. Then they adapt their forces to counter those specific defenses. Finally, they attack with overwhelming numbers while remaining immune to the defender's weapons." "That sounds like good strategy," to me, said General Wu Bin. It is, Dr. Haiwan agreed, against rational opponents who fight to preserve their forces and territory. But look at this. The display changed to show battle footage from a Veltari defense station. The crystalline aliens fought in perfect formation, retreating when their losses became too high, regrouping to defend the next position. They fight, like they're trying to solve a mathematical problem, Dr. Haiwan continued. Calculate the best position, use the most efficient weapons, minimize casualties. It's logical, but it's also predictable. Chief Engineer Tae-ho leaned forward. You're saying the machines beat them because they're too smart? I'm saying the machines beat them because they think like machines, Dr. Haiwan replied. They expect their enemies to make rational choices, but humans don't always do that. She changed the display to show footage from Earth's history. Soldiers charging across battlefields under heavy fire, ships ramming into larger vessels, warriors fighting to the death against impossible odds. Throughout human history, we've won battles by doing things that made no logical sense. We attack when we should retreat. We take risks that should get us killed. We refuse to give up even when defeat is certain. General Wu Bin frowned. That's not tactics, Doctor. That's desperation. Exactly, said Admiral Su Jin. And desperation is something these machines have never encountered. She stood up and began pacing around the room. Think about it. Every species in the galaxy evolved on worlds that took care of them. Perfect temperatures, no dangerous weather, food that grew. Naturally, they developed technology to make life even easier. But Earth tried to kill us, added Commander Nari, head of the Fleet Engineering Corps. Ice ages, volcanic eruptions, hurricanes, earthquakes. We learned to survive by being stubborn and crazy. The galaxy calls us deathworlders like it's an insult, Su Jin continued, but maybe it's actually our greatest advantage. We're the only species that grew up expecting the universe to be hostile. Dr. Haiwan nodded enthusiastically. I've been studying the psychological profiles of every species the Devourers have encountered. They all share the same basic trait. They avoid unnecessary risk. When the cost of fighting becomes too high, they retreat to preserve their forces. But humans don't think that way, said Captain Jun-ho, commander of the civilian fleet. When things get bad, we get angry. When we're cornered, we fight harder. The Devourers have programming to handle logical enemies, Dr. Haiwan explained. They can predict and counter rational strategies, but they have no protocols for dealing with opponents who become more dangerous when they're losing. General Wu Bin still looked skeptical. Even if that's true, we're still talking about fighting with inferior technology. Our best ships can't match a Veltari cruiser. Chief Engineer Tae-ho smiled grimly. Maybe not in a fair fight, but who says we have to fight fair? He activated his own display, showing technical drawings of human warships. Our ships aren't as advanced as theirs, but they're built differently. The aliens design their vessels. For efficiency and comfort, we design ours to keep fighting even when they're falling apart. The images showed the internal structure of a human destroyer compared to a Veltari ship. The alien vessel was elegant and streamlined, with systems designed for maximum performance. The human ship looked crude by comparison, but it had redundant systems, emergency backups, and repair stations throughout. Our ships can take more damage and keep fighting, Tae-ho continued. More importantly, they're designed to be repaired and modified quickly. We can adapt our tactics in the middle of a battle. There's another advantage, added Commander Nari. Our crews are used to working with broken equipment. Half the ships in the outer colonies are held together with spare parts and determination. Our people know how to improvise. Admiral Su Jin returned to her seat. So we have several advantages the Devourers haven't seen before. We're unpredictable, we're stubborn, our ships are tough, and our crews are used to impossible situations. But are those advantages enough? Asked General Wu Bin. We're talking about taking on an enemy that has conquered half the galaxy. Maybe not, Su Jin admitted. But consider the alternative. If we do nothing, the Devourers will eventually come for us anyway. At least this way we'll have allies. Dr. Hyawan brought up a new display showing population numbers. The galaxy has lost over 1 trillion sentient beings to the Devourers. If current trends continue, all organized civilization will be extinct within 50 years. And then the machines will come for Earth, said Captain Junho quietly. We'll be the last system left, facing an enemy that controls the resources of an entire galaxy. The room fell silent as everyone considered this. Admiral Su Jin looked around the table at the faces of Earth's military leadership. These were people who had spent their careers preparing for the impossible. There's one more thing to consider, she said. The message from the Veltari wasn't just asking for help. It was offering alliance, full membership in the Galactic Council, access to their technology, trade agreements, everything we've wanted for 50 years. If we survive, General Wu Bin pointed out. If we don't try, survival becomes irrelevant anyway, Su Jin replied. The question isn't whether we can win. The question is whether we're willing to show the galaxy what Deathworlders can do when someone threatens innocent people. Commander Nari stood up. I've seen the reports from the frontier colonies. Our people are already volunteering. Miners, traders, even civilian researchers. They want to help. The fleet commanders are ready too, added Captain Junho. We've been preparing for this fight since the first Devourer reports came in. We may not have the biggest ships or the best weapons, but we have something the galaxy has never seen before. What's that? Asked General Wu Bin. Captain Junho smiled, and for the first time since the meeting began, it was a confident expression. We have humans who grew up expecting the universe to try to kill them, and we're very good at proving the universe wrong. Admiral Su Jin called for a vote. The decision was unanimous. Humanity would answer the galaxy's cry for help, bringing with them all the chaos and determination that came from being born on a world that made survival an art form. The Deathworlders were going to war. The shipyards around Mars had never seen activity like this. Captain Junho floated outside the hull of a massive cargo hauler, watching welding sparks fly as his crew attached weapon mounts where shipping containers used to go. All around him, similar scenes played out across hundreds of civilian vessels. Junho, came Commander Nari's voice through his helmet radio. How long until the Prosperity's dream is ready for combat? He looked at the converted freighter, its hull now bristling, with missile launchers and armor plating. 2 more days for the weapon systems. The crew training will take longer. We don't have longer, Nari replied. Intelligence reports show 3 more Veltari systems have gone dark. The Devourers are accelerating their advance. Captain Junho pushed off from the ship's hull and activated his suit thrusters, flying toward the command station where Nari waited. Around him, the organized chaos of humanity's war preparation continued. Miners from the asteroid belt worked alongside naval engineers, installing military-grade shields on ore processors. Colony transport ships received new engines that would let them keep up with destroyers. Even luxury liners were being fitted with weapons, their passenger compartments converted into barracks. The civilians are adapting faster than I expected, Junho said, as he landed on the station's docking bay. The crew of that passenger liner figured out how to mount plasma cannons in their observation decks. Nari nodded grimly. Earth's population sees this as their chance to prove humanity belongs in the galaxy. Every ship that can fly is volunteering. We have retirement home residents demanding to be put back on active duty. Inside the command center, the scale of humanity's mobilization became clear. Holographic displays showed ship positions throughout the solar system. Green dots represented military vessels, destroyers, cruisers, and the few battleships that made up Earth's official fleet. But there were far more blue dots, representing civilian ships now being converted for war. Status report, Nari called, out as they entered. Lieutenant Dongwu looked up from his console. 2,300 vessels confirmed for the Armada. That includes everything from naval ships to converted garbage scows. Total crew complement will be just over 4 million. 4 million people. Junho said quietly. The largest military force in human history. And most of them have never been in a real battle, Nari added. Are we sending them to die? Before Junho could answer, a new voice spoke from the entrance. We're sending them to do what humans do best. They turned to see General Wu Bin entering the command center, his uniform bearing the insignia of the new expeditionary force. Behind him walked Major Yunju, whose Marines would be leading the boarding actions against Devourer ships. General, Nari said, I didn't expect you so soon. Admiral Sujin sent me to oversee the final preparations, Wu Bin replied. She wants to make sure we're implementing Doctrine Havoc correctly. Doctrine Havoc was humanity's new military philosophy, developed specifically for fighting the Devourers. Instead of the careful defensive strategies used by galactic civilizations, it emphasized speed, aggression, and overwhelming force applied at unexpected points. Show me what you've planned, Wu Bin said. Lieutenant Dong Wu brought up a tactical display showing the proposed fleet organization. We're dividing the Armada into fast attack groups. Each group has a mix of military ships and converted civilians. The idea is to hit multiple targets simultaneously. The aliens always concentrate their forces, Major Yunju explained. They build strong defensive positions and dare the enemy to attack them. But the Devourers have adapted to break those positions. So we're going to do the opposite, Junho continued. Spread out, attack everywhere at once, keep moving. Never let the machines predict where we'll strike next. General Wu Bin studied the display carefully. What about coordination? How do you command 4 million people spread across multiple star systems? We don't, Nari said simply. Each group gets general objectives and the freedom to accomplish them however they see fit. If communication breaks down, local commanders take over. That sounds like chaos, Wu Bin observed. It is chaos, Junho agreed. Controlled chaos. The Devourers can adapt to organized strategies because they're predictable, but they can't adapt to 4 million humans all making independent decisions. Major Yunju activated another display showing Marine training exercises. We're preparing for something the galaxy has never tried. Boarding actions against Devourer ships. The aliens always fight at long range with energy weapons, but humans know how to fight with knives and explosives in narrow corridors. The machines are designed to operate in space, she continued. They're not built for hand-to-hand combat in confined spaces. We're going to get inside their ships and tear them apart from within. Lieutenant Dong Wu brought up a new screen, showing supply logistics. The biggest challenge is keeping everyone supplied. We're taking everything, ammunition, food, medical supplies, spare parts. Each ship has to be ready to operate independently for months. What about fuel? General Wu Bin asked. We're carrying portable refineries, Nari explained. The outer colonies developed them for deep space mining. We can process any asteroid or gas giant into ship fuel. As long as there's matter in the system, we can keep moving. Captain Junho floated over to a window overlooking the shipyard. A converted colony ship drifted past, its agricultural sections now housing missile magazines. Children's playgrounds had been turned into fighter launch bays. It was a heartbreaking transformation, but also inspiring. General, he said, do you really think this will work? Wu Bin joined him at the window. I think we're about to find out what makes humans special. Every other species in the galaxy evolved to live in harmony with their environment. They developed technology to make life easier and safer. But Earth never let us get comfortable, Junho said, understanding. Exactly. We learned to adapt, to improvise, to survive impossible situations. And now we're going to teach the galaxy that sometimes the best defense is a completely insane offense. An alarm chimed throughout the command center. Lieutenant Dong Wu called out urgently, "Incoming transmission from Admiral Sujin, Priority 1. The Admiral's face appeared on the main screen, her expression grim. All units, prepare for immediate departure. Long-range sensors have detected a massive Devourer fleet moving toward the Veltari core worlds. If they fall, the machines will control the galaxy's primary manufacturing systems. How long do we have? General Wubin asked. 72 hours to reach the battle zone, Sujin replied. The Veltari are making their final stand. If we're going to help them, it has to be now. Nari turned to her staff. Signal all ships. Emergency deployment protocols are now in effect. Any vessel that can fight gets 72 hours to finish. Preparations. What about the ships that aren't ready? Major Yunju asked. They come anyway, General Wubin said firmly. This is what we trained for. This is why we converted garbage haulers into warships and taught accountants to fire missiles. Captain Jun Ho watched the bustling activity around him. Engineers ran between stations, making final adjustments to weapon systems. Marines loaded, boarding equipment onto shuttles. Civilian volunteers practiced emergency procedures they hoped they'd never need. In 72 hours, this chaotic collection of military ships and converted civilians would face an enemy that had destroyed civilizations. They would be outnumbered, outgunned, and fighting with equipment held together by spare parts and determination. It was exactly the kind of impossible situation that humans had been preparing for their entire evolutionary history. Signal the fleet, Junho said with growing confidence. Tell them the Deathworlders are coming. Outside the station, thousands of ships began moving toward the edge of the solar system, their crews ready to show the galaxy what controlled chaos could accomplish against an enemy that thought it understood war. The Armada was forged and ready. Now came the test. The Veltari homeworld burned beneath a sky full of silver death. Captain Minji watched from the bridge of her destroyer, the UES Thunderbolt, as devourer ships swarmed around the crystalline planet like metal insects. Each machine was the size of a skyscraper, their hulls glowing with the energy they had stolen from consumed worlds. They moved in perfect formation, their weapons carving precise holes through the planet's defense grid. Captain called communications. Officer Yeonwoo, we're receiving transmissions from the surface. The Veltari are calling for immediate evacuation of their core cities. Minji could see why. Where the devourer beams struck, the beautiful crystal spires that had taken centuries to grow simply ceased to exist. The machines didn't just destroy, they converted matter into raw materials for building more of themselves. Status on the human fleet, she asked. Admiral Su Jin's main force is still 6 hours out, replied Lieutenant Dongwu at the tactical station. But our advanced squadron is in position. 12 destroyers, 8 converted freighters, and about 300 fighters. Minji looked at the tactical display. The human advance force was tiny compared to the thousands of devourer ships surrounding the planet. By any reasonable military doctrine, they should wait for reinforcements. But the Veltari didn't have 6 hours. Signal the squadron, she said. All ships. This is Thunderbolt Actual. We're going in. Ma'am, Dongwu said carefully, the odds are approximately 15,000 to 1 against us. Then it's a fair fight, Minji replied with a grim smile. The machines have never fought. Humans before. The squadron dropped out of formation and accelerated toward the planet. As they approached, the Devourer fleet began to respond. Massive ships turned their weapons away from the surface, targeting the approaching humans with beams that could vaporize a mountain. Evasive maneuvers, Minji ordered. Pattern Chaos 7. The human ships scattered in all directions, their movements apparently random but actually following a complex pattern designed to be unpredictable. Where galactic fleets moved in careful formations, the humans danced through space like leaves in a storm. The first Devourer shots missed completely. The machines recalculated and fired again, but the human ships had already changed direction in ways that made no mathematical sense. A converted freighter called Miner's Hope actually flew straight up relative to the battle plane, forcing the Devourers to waste precious seconds repositioning their weapons. First wave incoming, reported Weapons Officer Hayin. 12 Devourer destroyers breaking formation to intercept us. Perfect, Minji said. Target the lead ship. All weapons, maximum power. The Thunderbolt's missiles streaked across space, followed by plasma bolts from its main guns. The Devourer ship's shields absorbed most of the damage, exactly as expected. But what happened next wasn't in any galactic military manual. "Ramming speed," Minji ordered. "Captain?" Dongwu looked shocked. "You heard me. Emergency power to forward shields. We're going right through them." The destroyer accelerated directly at the Devourer ship, its engines straining at maximum output. The machine tried to maneuver away, but it had been designed to fight logical opponents who valued their own survival. The Thunderbolt struck the Devourer's hull at 17% of light speed. The impact vaporized the front third of both ships, but the destroyer kept flying, its crew thrown against their restraints but still alive thanks to the excessive safety systems human ships carried. "Hull breach on decks 1 through 5, reported Chief Engineer Chang Min from the engine room. "But we're still functional. Emergency repair teams are already working." Around them, the rest of the human squadron was following similar tactics. The converted freighter Prosperity's Dream rammed a Devourer cruiser, then deployed Marines through the hole it had created. The UES Defiant flew straight into a cloud of Devourer fighters, spinning like a drill bit and firing in all directions. "The machines don't know how to respond," observed Lieutenant Dongwu. "Their formation is breaking apart." Minji could see it on the tactical display. The Devourers had adapted to fight careful defensive opponents. They had protocols for every known galactic strategy. But they had no programming for enemies who treated their own ships like weapons. "Squadron leaders," she called over the radio, "implement pattern madness. All ships, pick targets, and do whatever it takes to destroy them." What followed was unlike any battle in galactic history. Human ships dove through Devourer formations, their crews laughing and shouting as they fired at point-blank range. When their weapons failed, they rammed. When their hulls were breached, they kept fighting. When their engines died, they drifted, close enough to deploy boarding parties. Sergeant So Young led her Marines through the torn hull of a Devourer ship, their magnetic boots clanging on metal corridors that had never been designed for organic life. The air was toxic and the gravity was wrong, but the Marines had trained in conditions like this their entire careers. "Remember," she called to her squad, "these machines think like computers. Disable their central processing units and they'll shut down." The corridors were filled with mechanical defenders, spider-like drones with cutting lasers, and small artillery bots that fired explosive shells. But the Devourers had never faced opponents who could think creatively in 3 dimensions. Private Kyung-ho used his plasma torch to cut through a wall, flanking a group of defenders from an unexpected direction. Corporal Hyojin threw grenades around corners using the curved corridor walls to bounce them into positions the machines couldn't calculate. "Processing center located," So Young reported as they reached the ship's core. It was a massive chamber, filled with crystalline computers that pulsed with electronic thought. Beginning demolition, the Marines planted their charges with practiced efficiency. They had 30 seconds to get clear before the explosives would turn the Devourer's brain into metallic confetti. They made it with 5 seconds to spare. Back on the Thunderbolt's bridge, Captain Minji watched another Devourer ship go dark as its processing center was destroyed. Around the planet, the human squadron was taking terrible casualties, but inflicting impossible damage on an enemy that had ruled the galaxy through fear. "Captain," Yanwu called excitedly, "we're getting transmissions from the Veltari surface. They're asking who we are and how we're winning." "Tell them," Minji said as she watched the UES Valiant ram a Devourer battleship and somehow survive the impact, "that the Deathworlders have arrived." The battle continued for another hour before Admiral Sujin's main fleet arrived to turn the tide completely. But by then, the advanced squadron had already accomplished something no galactic fleet had managed in 3 centuries of war. They had made the Devourers retreat. As the surviving human ships regrouped around the rescued Veltari homeworld, the crystalline aliens sent a message that would spread throughout the galaxy within days. To the warriors of Earth, the Veltari, leader said, its voice filled with something that might have been awe. We do not understand your methods. Your tactics make no sense. Your strategies violate every principle of logical warfare. But you have saved our world and our people. How? Do we thank those who fight like the universe itself has gone insane? Captain Minji, floating in the emergency medical bay while doctors treated her injuries from the ramming attack, smiled as she heard the message. Tell them, she said to Lieutenant Dongwu, that we're just getting started. The galaxy had seen what humans could do when someone threatened innocent people. The Devourers, for the first time in their existence, had encountered an enemy that became more dangerous when the situation became impossible. And this was only the beginning. Admiral Sujin stood in the command center of the UES Indomitable, watching reports flow in from across the galaxy. 3 weeks had passed since the battle at the Veltari homeworld, and everything had changed. Status report, she called to her. Staff Commander Byung-ho looked up from his console. 14 star systems liberated in the past week. The Devourer advance has stopped in 7 sectors. For the first time in 3 centuries, the machines are actually retreating. Sujin nodded, but her expression remained serious. Casualties? Heavy, Byung-ho admitted. We've lost 43 ships and over 2,000 crew members, but we're taking out Devourer vessels at a rate of 8 to 1. The numbers were encouraging, but Sujin knew they came at a terrible cost. Human ships weren't designed for the kind of fighting they were doing. Every victory required crews to take risks that should have killed them. Admiral, called Lieutenant Hay in from the communications station. Incoming priority message from Major Yunju. She says she's discovered something important about Devourer ship construction. The main screen flickered to life, showing Major Yunju's soot-covered face. Behind her, sparks flew from damaged Devourer machinery as her Marines continued their demolition work. Admiral, Yunju said, breathing hard, we've been inside 12 different Devourer ships now. I think I know why our boarding tactics are so effective. Explain, Sujin replied. These machines are designed for efficiency, not defense. Their corridors are built for maintenance drones, not combat. They have no security checkpoints, no defensive positions, no way to seal off compromised sections. Yunju moved her camera to show the interior of the Devourer ship. The corridors were wide and straight, with no cover for defenders. The walls were thin to save material, making them easy to cut through with standard equipment. More importantly, she continued, they can't handle chaos. When we board their ships, we don't follow any predictable pattern. We cut through walls, attack from multiple directions, target systems randomly. Their defense protocols break down completely. Sujin felt a grin spreading across her face. You're saying they're helpless against human boarding parties? Not helpless, Yunju corrected, but completely unprepared. They have weapons and defenses, but they're all designed for logical, predictable attacks. When we fight like the ship is on fire and we don't care if we die, they can't adapt fast enough. What about the larger strategic picture? Sujin asked. Are we actually hurting their overall capability? Commander Byung-ho brought up a galactic map showing Devourer-controlled territory. The interesting thing is that our victories are having effects beyond the immediate battle zones. Devourer fleets in sectors we haven't even visited are changing their behavior. How so? They're becoming more defensive. They're pulling back to protect their manufacturing worlds instead of continuing their advance. It's like they're afraid of us. Sujin studied the map carefully. The red areas marking Devourer control had stopped expanding for the first time in centuries. In several places, they were actually shrinking as human forces liberated occupied systems. Signal all fleet commanders, she said. I want to implement the Pyrrhic Protocol. The bridge crew exchanged glances. The Pyrrhic Protocol was humanity's most radical military doctrine. The idea that sometimes the best way to win was to appear completely willing to lose. Admiral, Byung-ho said carefully, That strategy involves deliberate suicide attacks. The casualty rates will be enormous. The casualty rates are already enormous, Su-Jin replied. But we're learning something important about these machines. They're programmed to preserve themselves above all else. Every decision they make is based on cost-benefit analysis. But humans don't think that way, Lieutenant Hay-In said, understanding. Exactly. When we treat our ships like ammunition instead of assets, the machines literally cannot compute effective responses. Their entire strategic framework assumes that enemies will try to preserve their forces. A new voice spoke from the entrance, to the command center, which is why they're starting to panic. Everyone turned to see Dr. Haiwan entering, carrying a data pad filled with analysis reports. I've been studying the communication patterns between Devourer ships. They're sending more messages now than they have in the past century. What kind of messages? Su-Jin asked. Requests for guidance from their central processors. Battle reports that don't match any of their prediction models. Questions about how to handle enemies that attack harder when they're losing. Dr. Haiwan activated the main display, showing intercepted Devourer communications translated into Korean. The messages were repetitive and increasingly desperate in tone. Unknown enemy classification required, one message read. Standard tactical. Responses ineffective. Request immediate strategic guidance. Enemy vessels exhibiting irrational behavior, said another. Attacking despite certain destruction. Motivation unclear. Cannot predict movement patterns. They're confused, Su-Jin realized. For the first time in their existence, they're facing something they don't understand. And confusion is exactly what we need, Dr. Haiwan agreed. Confused. Enemies make mistakes. They waste resources. They hesitate at critical moments. They miss opportunities. Commander Byung-ho looked up from his tactical analysis. Admiral, we're receiving reports from Captain Seung-hwan's task force. They've engaged a major Devourer fleet near the Zephyrian border. The main screen changed to show Captain Seung-hwan's face. His ship was clearly in the middle of a fierce battle. The bridge shook constantly and sparks flew from damaged consoles. Admiral, he said with a wild grin, you need to see this. We're implementing the Pyrrhic protocol, and the results are incredible. The view changed to show the external camera feed. Seung-hwan's task force consisted of 20 human ships facing nearly 200 Devourer vessels. But instead of trying to survive the encounter, the human ships were deliberately charging into the enemy formation. Watch what happens when we ram them, Seung-hwan said. On the screen, the UES determination accelerated directly at a Devourer battleship. At the last second, the machine tried to avoid the collision, breaking formation and disrupting the firing solutions of a dozen nearby vessels. The human ship struck its target and exploded, but the chain reaction destroyed 3 more Devourer ships. They're programmed to avoid unnecessary losses, Seung-hwan explained. When we make it clear that we're willing to trade 1 ship for 3 of theirs, they panic. Around his ship, similar scenes played out repeatedly. Human vessels dove into Devourer formations like guided missiles, forcing the machines to choose between accepting damage or breaking their careful tactical arrangements. Casualties? Su-Jin asked. 12 ships lost, Seung-hwan replied. But we've destroyed over 60 Devourer vessels. More importantly, their entire fleet is retreating. They can't handle opponents who treat death as a tactical option. Su-Jin nodded grimly. All fleet commanders, you heard Captain Seung-hwan's report. The Pyrrhic protocol is now our standard operating procedure. Every human ship is authorized to use itself as a weapon if necessary. Admiral, Lieutenant Hay-In said, we're getting communications from allied species across the galaxy. The Veltari, the Nethians, and what's left of the Zephyrian hives. They want to coordinate their forces with ours. What are they saying? They want to learn human tactics. They're asking for training in what they call chaos warfare. Su-Jin smiled. 3 weeks ago, the galaxy had considered humans too dangerous and unpredictable to be allies. Now those same qualities were being seen as the key to survival. Signal. All allied forces, she said. "Tell them we're happy to teach them how to fight like deathworlders. But warn them, once you start thinking like a human, you can never go back to fighting safe." On the main screen, the galactic map updated again. More systems showed green as human and allied forces continued their advance. The Devourer expansion had not just stopped, it was reversing. For the first time in centuries, the galaxy had hope. And that hope came from a species that had learned to win by being willing to lose everything. The tide of war was turning, carried by ships, crewed by people who had grown up expecting the universe to be hostile. The machines had ruled through, cold logic and superior numbers, but they had never faced an enemy that fought with the fury of a species that refused to surrender, no matter what the cost. Captain So Young drifted in space, watching the horror unfold before her through the cracked visor of her helmet. The Devourer origin world hung before them like a cancerous growth, its surface covered in machines that stretched from horizon to horizon. "Sweet Mother of Earth," whispered Sergeant Jinwoo over the radio. "How many ships are they building down there?" So Young checked her scanner readings. Computer estimates over 10 million Devourer vessels in various stages of construction. And that's just what we can see from orbit. Her reconnaissance team floated hidden behind a destroyed asteroid, one of thousands that had once been planets. Before the machines got to them, the entire star system had been converted into a massive factory, turning stellar matter into an endless stream of killer robots. "Captain," called Corporal Minsu, "I'm picking up massive energy readings from the planet's core. Whatever they're building down there, it's big." So Young adjusted her scope and looked deeper into the machine world's surface. Through the layers of construction, she could see something that made her blood freeze. At the planet's center, surrounded by rings of defensive installations, was a structure the size of a moon. "Communications," she said to her team. "We need to get this information back to Admiral Sujin immediately." Engineer Chang Min was already working on their stealth transmitter. "Signal ready, Captain. But if we broadcast, every Devourer in the system will know we're here." "Do it anyway," So Young ordered. "The fleet needs to know what they're facing." The transmission burst across space in a tight beam aimed at the human fleet, 15 light hours away. Within minutes, they received a response from the UES Indomitable. Reconnaissance. "Team, this is Admiral Sujin," came the familiar voice. "Are you certain about these readings?" "Confirmed, Admiral," So Young replied. "The origin world is more than just a factory. They're building something at the planetary core that's generating enough power to run an entire sector." "Any idea what it is?" Engineer Chang Min had been analyzing the energy patterns. "Ma'am, based on the quantum signatures, I think it's a control system. Something that coordinates all Devourer operations across the galaxy." There was silence on the channel for several seconds. Then Admiral Sujin's voice returned, grimmer than before. "Team, you need to get closer. We need detailed scans of that central structure." "Admiral," So Young said carefully, "that would be a suicide mission. The defensive grid around the core has more firepower than most star systems." "I know," Sujin replied. "But if that structure really is their central command, destroying it might shut down every Devourer in the galaxy. Are you willing to try?" So Young looked at her team. These were Marines who had volunteered for the most dangerous missions humanity could devise. They had boarded Devourer ships, fought in the vacuum of space, and survived battles that should have killed them all. "Give us 6 hours to plan the approach," she said. The team spent those hours studying the planet's defenses and looking for any weakness they could exploit. The machine world was protected by layers of automated weapons, shield generators, and patrol ships. Any direct assault would be detected and destroyed within minutes. "There," said Corporal Minsu, pointing to a section of the planetary surface. "That processing facility is sucking in asteroid debris for raw materials. If we could disguise ourselves as space junk—" "The debris gets sorted by automated systems," Chang Min added. "But if we could make it past the initial scanners, we might be able to reach the core facility." It was an insane plan, even by human standards. They would have to disable their ship's power systems, seal themselves in emergency suits, and drift through a machine sorting facility that was designed to break down matter at the molecular level. "Let's do it," So Young said. They powered down their ship until it was virtually indistinguishable from dead metal, then ejected themselves in specialized infiltration pods designed to look like chunks of asteroid. The pods were cramped, uncomfortable, and offered no protection beyond basic life support. For 3 hours, they drifted through space as the Devourer collection systems pulled them toward the planet. Massive tractors' beams grabbed their disguised pods, along with tons of genuine space debris, feeding everything into processing facilities the size of cities. "Stay calm," So Young whispered to her team as they were drawn into the machine complex. Around them, sorting systems began separating useful materials from worthless rock. Their pods had been designed to register as low-value metals, something the machines would process but not examine closely. The plan worked perfectly until Sergeant Jinwoo's pod was grabbed by a detailed analysis arm. "My cover's blown," he reported, calmly. "Getting ready for defensive action." "Negative," So Young ordered. "Maintain position. We can't risk exposing the rest of the team." They watched helplessly as the analysis system determined that Jinwoo's pod contained organic material. Alarms began sounding throughout the facility as the machines realized they had been infiltrated. "Go," Jinwoo said over the radio. "I'll buy you time." His pod exploded in a burst of plasma fire, taking out several sorting mechanisms and creating enough chaos to mask the movement of the remaining team members. They dropped deeper into the facility as security systems scrambled to locate the remaining intruders. "Jinwoo's sacrifice won't be wasted," So Young promised, as they moved through maintenance tunnels toward the planetary core. The journey took another 4 hours of crawling through passages filled with toxic gases and mechanical hazards. But finally they reached their target, a vast chamber containing what could only be described as a mechanical brain. The central control system was a crystalline structure the size of a city, pulsing with data flows that connected it to every Devourer unit in the galaxy. Streams of information flowed through quantum conduits like electronic blood vessels. "This is it," Changmin breathed. "This thing is controlling the entire Devourer network." "Can we destroy it?" So Young asked. "Not with the explosives we're carrying," Changmin replied. "But I might be able to reprogram it." "Reprogram it to do what?" Changmin was already connecting his portable computer to one of the access ports. "The Devourers were originally designed as peacekeepers, right? They were supposed to protect galactic civilization from aggressive species." "That's what the historical records suggest," So Young agreed. "Then their core programming should still contain those original directives. If I can access the root code and modify the target parameters." Alarms began blaring throughout the chamber as security systems detected the unauthorized access. Mechanical guards poured into the chamber, spider-like drones with plasma weapons and larger units that looked like walking tanks. "How long do you need?" So Young asked, drawing her weapon. 10 minutes, Changmin replied, his fingers flying over his computer interface. "You've got it," So Young said grimly. She and the remaining team members took defensive positions around Changmin's location. The battle that followed was desperate and chaotic. Human weapons designed for ship-to-ship combat were used at point-blank range against machines built to maintain galactic order. Corporal Min Su used his plasma torch to slice through the legs of a tank-sized guardian. So Young emptied her rifle into a swarm of attack drones, then used the empty weapon as a club when she ran out of ammunition. 8 minutes, Changmin called out, still working despite the battle raging around him. More guards poured into the chamber. So Young realized they wouldn't be able to hold them off much longer, but then she remembered something Admiral Su Jin had said about human tactics. "Min Su," she called, "arm all our remaining explosives." "Captain, if we can't hold them off, we'll bring the whole chamber down. Either Changmin succeeds or nobody does." They fought with the desperate fury of humans who knew their mission could save the galaxy. When Min Su fell to Guardian fire, So Young picked up his weapons and kept fighting. When her own ammunition ran out, she used debris from destroyed machines as projectiles. 30 seconds, Changmin announced. So Young was down to fighting with her combat knife when Changmin finally shouted, "Done!" The effect was immediate and dramatic. Throughout the chamber, Devourer guards simply stopped moving. Across the galaxy, every machine unit received the same updated directive. The Devourers had been reprogrammed. Their new mission, protect all. Sentient life, not just peaceful species. And their definition of threats to galactic civilization now included their own previous behavior. "Changmin," So Young said as they watched the machines around them power down. "What exactly did you tell them?" The engineer grinned, despite his injuries. "I told them that the greatest threat to galactic peace was an out-of-control artificial intelligence that had been consuming worlds for 3 centuries, and that the species best qualified to handle that threat was humanity, the only civilization tough enough to fight for others without expecting anything in return." As they made their way back to the surface, So Young realized that the galaxy was about to change forever. The Devourers hadn't been destroyed. They had been converted into humanity's partners in protecting galactic civilization. The machines that had once consumed worlds would now help defend them. And they would do so under the guidance of the only species crazy enough to fight the universe itself when innocent people needed protecting. Admiral Sujin stood on the bridge of the UES Indomitable, watching the largest military formation in galactic history prepare for what might be the final battle of the war. Operation Ragnarok had brought together every available human ship, along with allied vessels from 17 different species, all converging on the last major Devourer stronghold. "Final count, Admiral," reported Commander Byung-ho. 4,000 human ships, 12,000 allied vessels, and approximately 800 reformed Devourer units under our command. Sujin nodded grimly. The reprogrammed machines had proven surprisingly effective allies, their vast computational power now dedicated to protecting life instead of consuming it. But the remaining hostile Devourers had retreated to their most heavily defended position, a fortress system with defensive capabilities that dwarfed anything else in the galaxy. "What's the latest intelligence on the target?" she asked. Captain Xiong Huan, recently promoted after his success with suicide tactics, brought up the tactical display. "The fortress system contains the backup control networks for all remaining hostile Devourers. If we don't destroy it, they'll eventually override our reprogramming and return to their original behavior." "How many ships are we facing?" "Conservative estimate, 2 million Devourer vessels, plus fixed defenses that could destroy entire fleets. It's the most heavily fortified position in galactic history." Sujin studied the display showing the enemy stronghold. It was built around a collapsed star, using the intense gravity well as both power source and natural defense. Approach vectors were limited, and every possible attack route was covered by overlapping fields of fire. "Ma'am," called Lieutenant Hay-In from communications, "incoming message from the Galactic Council. They're recommending we negotiate a ceasefire." "Put them through," Sujin said. The main screen showed High Counselor Velthara of the Veltari, along with representatives from other major species. The crystalline being's expression was difficult to read, but its tone carried worry. "Admiral Sujin," Velthara said, "our combined analysis indicates that attacking the fortress system will result in catastrophic losses. Perhaps 90% of all attacking forces will be destroyed." "We're aware of the projections," Sujin replied. "Then surely you understand that such losses are unacceptable. We should seek a peaceful solution." Sujin looked around her bridge, at the faces of her crew. These were people who had volunteered to fight in space, knowing they might never see Earth again. They had watched friends die in battles across the galaxy, and they had never once suggested retreating. "High Counselor," she said carefully, "with respect, You don't understand how humans think. Acceptable losses isn't a calculation we make. Then, what calculation do you make? Asked another council member. We ask whether the cause is worth fighting for, Su Jin replied. And if the answer is yes, we fight until we win or until there's nobody left to fight. The council members exchanged glances that suggested they found this attitude incomprehensible. Su Jin wasn't surprised. The galaxy's species had evolved on worlds that taught them to preserve life at all costs. Earth had taught humans that sometimes life was worth sacrificing for something greater. The fortress must be destroyed, she continued. If it isn't, the devourers will eventually return to consuming worlds. How many billions of lives is your caution worth? Before the council could respond, Su Jin cut the transmission. She had a battle to plan. All ship commanders, she announced over the fleet communication system. This is Admiral Su Jin. Operation Ragnarok will commence in 6 hours. Every crew member needs to understand what we're asking of them. She paused, looking out at the vast fleet assembled around her flagship. Human ships mixed with alien vessels and reformed devourer units, all preparing for a battle that would determine the future of galactic civilization. We're going to attack a fortress that can destroy us all, she continued. The odds are terrible. The casualties will be enormous. Many of you will not survive the next 12 hours. On ships throughout the fleet, crews listened to their admirals' words. Marines checked their equipment one final time. Engineers made sure their vessels could keep fighting even after taking mortal damage. Pilots practiced maneuvers they hoped they'd live long enough to use. But here's what I want you to remember, Su Jin said. 3 months ago, the galaxy was dying. Ancient machines were consuming everything and nobody knew how to stop them. The greatest civilizations in galactic history were preparing for extinction. Then Earth got involved. We showed them that sometimes the best strategy is controlled insanity. We taught them that being willing to lose everything is the secret to winning against impossible odds. Captain Shung Huan smiled as he listened from his ship's bridge. Around him, his crew was making final preparations for what they all knew would be their last battle. But nobody looked scared. They looked determined. The fortress ahead of us represents the last hope of machines that want to turn the galaxy into a lifeless factory, Su Jin continued. They're counting on us to be reasonable. They expect us to retreat when the cost becomes too high. They're about to learn that humans aren't reasonable when innocent lives are at stake. Across the fleet, crews began singing. It started on the UES Defiant, where Captain Minji led her people in an old Earth song about standing together against impossible odds. The song spread from ship to ship, carried by radio transmissions until the entire human fleet was singing in harmony. The alien crews listened in amazement. They had never heard of a military force that sang before battle, especially when facing certain death. All ships, Su Jin announced, begin the attack run. Remember, every ship is authorized to use itself as a weapon. Every crew member is empowered to take whatever action will hurt the enemy most. And if anyone asks why we're willing, to die for people we've never met on worlds we've never seen, tell them this is what deathworlders do when someone threatens our galaxy. The attack began with the reformed devourers leading the charge. The reprogrammed machines threw themselves at their former allies' defenses, using their knowledge of devourer tactics to find weaknesses in the fortress systems. Behind them came the human fleet, their ships diving through defensive fire with the reckless courage that had become their trademark. When the UES Thunderbolt's engines were destroyed, Captain Minji used the ship's remaining momentum to ram a defense platform. When the converted freighter Miner's Hope lost its weapons, its crew used the cargo bay to launch mining explosives at point-blank range. Admiral, reported Commander Byung-ho, we're taking exactly the casualties we expected, 90% losses in the first wave. And the fortress? Su Jin asked. Outer defenses are down by 60%. The second wave is moving into assault position. On the surface of the fortress world, Sergeant Hei In led her Marines through corridors filled with desperate machine defenders. These devourers knew they were fighting for their existence, and they had abandoned any pretense of logic or efficiency. "Remember," she called to her squad, "we're not trying to survive this mission. We're trying to complete it." The Marines fought with the casual acceptance of death that marked human soldiers throughout history. When Private Dong Min was cornered by 3 Guardian drones, he armed all his remaining grenades and charged them head-on. When Corporal Yuri's weapon jammed, she used her combat knife to disable a security system that was blocking their advance. Step by step, taking casualties that would have broken any other military force, the humans advanced toward the fortress. "Core." "Admiral," came Captain Xiong Huan's voice over the radio. "We've reached the central processing unit, beginning final assault." Su Jin watched the tactical display as her forces converged on their target. The cost had been exactly as projected. 90% of the attacking fleet was gone, but the remaining 10% was enough. "All units," she announced, "prepare for final bombardment. Every remaining ship, target the core facility. Everything you have left." What followed was the most concentrated firepower display in galactic history. Damaged human ships used their last missiles. Crippled alien vessels fired their remaining energy weapons. Reformed devourers turned their own technology against the fortress that had created them. The core facility, designed to withstand the combined fleets of multiple species, simply couldn't handle the sheer volume of fire directed at it by forces that treated death as a tactical option. "Direct hit," reported Byung-ho. "The fortress core is... Admiral, it's gone. Complete destruction." Across the galaxy, the remaining hostile devourers simply stopped functioning. Without their central coordination, they became harmless scrap metal floating in space. "Admiral," came a transmission from the Galactic Council, "we're detecting massive system shutdowns across all former devourer territories. Is it over?" Su Jin looked around her bridge. Half her crew was injured, her ship was barely functional, and she had just lost 90% of humanity's military force. "Yes," she said with quiet satisfaction. "It's over. The galaxy is safe." The Deathworlders had kept their promise. They had saved a galaxy by being willing to sacrifice everything for people they had never met, and in doing so, they had proven that sometimes the most dangerous species makes the best guardian. 1 year after the Battle of the Fortress, Colonel Ji-hoon stood before the assembled Galactic Council in the great crystal chamber of the Veltari homeworld. The hall that had once echoed with desperate pleas for help now hummed with the sounds of reconstruction and hope. "Honored representatives," he began, his voice carrying clearly through the translation systems. "I bring you the annual report on galactic security operations." The council chamber had changed dramatically since the end of the Devourer War. Where once only a few species had held seats, now dozens of civilizations were represented. The empty chairs of extinct races served as silent reminders of what had been lost and what had been saved. "In the past year," Ji-hoon continued, "joint human devourer patrol fleets have prevented 47 potential conflicts, mediated 12 territorial disputes, and provided disaster relief to over 200 worlds." High Counselor Velthara of the Veltari rose from her crystalline seat. "Colonel, the Council remains amazed by the transformation of the Devourer machines. How do you explain their dedication to protecting life when they once consumed it?" Ji-hoon smiled. "They learned something that many species find difficult to understand. Sometimes the greatest strength comes from serving something larger than yourself." On the great display screens around the chamber, images showed the new reality of galactic civilization. Human ships flew alongside reformed devourers, their crews, working together to maintain peace across thousands of star systems. The machines that had once terrified the galaxy now served as its guardians, their vast computational power dedicated to solving problems instead of creating them. "The Devourers have become more than allies," Ji-hoon explained. "They've become students, They're learning from humanity what it means to fight for others without expecting anything in return. Ambassador Somin of the Nethian Collective spoke next, her gas form shimmering with curiosity. Colonel, there are reports that human military doctrine is being adopted by species throughout the galaxy. Some council members find this concerning. In what way? Ji-hoon asked. The willingness to accept massive casualties for strategic objectives, the use of civilian vessels in military operations. These methods seem... She paused, searching for the right word. Extreme. Ji-hoon nodded thoughtfully. Ambassador, you're right that human military doctrine is different from traditional galactic warfare. We don't fight to minimize losses. We fight to achieve objectives that are worth any sacrifice. But surely there must be limits, interjected Representative Zarkon of the Hegemony Worlds. Some costs are too high to pay. Are they? Ji-hoon asked quietly. A year ago, your civilization was facing extinction. The galaxy was being consumed by machines that turned living worlds into factories. What cost would have been too high to prevent that? The chamber fell silent as the representatives considered this. They all remembered the desperate months when system after system fell to the devourers, when even the greatest military powers in the galaxy seemed helpless. The difference, Ji-hoon continued, is that humans learned long ago that there are things worth dying for. Freedom, justice, the right of others to exist. When those things are threatened, no sacrifice is too great. Admiral Su-jin entered the chamber, her uniform bearing the insignia of the new Galactic Defense Force. She had been promoted to Supreme Commander after the war, leading a joint military organization that included ships from every major species. Forgive my interruption, she said, but I bring urgent news from the Outer Rim. The council chamber's attention focused on her immediately. What's happened? Asked High Counselor Velthera. Our deep space sensors have detected something approaching from outside the galaxy, Su-jin replied. Long-range analysis suggests it's an invasion fleet from another galaxy entirely. Murmurs of concern rippled through the chamber. The representatives had grown comfortable in the peace that followed the Devourer War. The idea of facing a new threat from beyond their own galaxy was terrifying. How large is this fleet? Asked Ambassador Somin. Preliminary scans suggest millions of ships, Su-jin replied grimly. Possibly tens of millions, and they're using technology we don't recognize. When will they arrive? Colonel Ji-hoon asked. 6 months, assuming they maintain current speed. The chamber erupted in worried conversations as representatives began discussing evacuation plans and defensive strategies, but High Counselor Velthara called for silence. Admiral Su-jin, she said, what does humanity recommend? Su-jin looked around the chamber at the faces of beings from dozens of different species. A year ago, these same representatives had considered humans too dangerous to be trusted with membership in galactic civilization. Now they were asking for human leadership in the face of the unknown. We recommend, she said clearly, that the galaxy prepare to show these invaders what happens when you threaten a civilization that includes Deathworlders. You're suggesting we fight? Asked Representative Zarkon incredulously. Against an unknown enemy with superior numbers and possibly superior technology? I'm suggesting, Su-jin replied, that we've already proven what determination can accomplish. Against impossible odds, the Devourers had superior numbers and technology too. Colonel Ji-hoon stepped forward. The galaxy is no longer the same collection of peaceful civilizations that almost fell to the machines. We've learned to fight like humans. We've learned to accept risks that seemed impossible a year ago. More importantly, Admiral Su-jin added, we have allies that didn't exist before the war. The reformed Devourers have given us capabilities that no single species could achieve alone. As if summoned by her words, a new voice spoke from the chamber's communication system. It was one of the reformed Devourer central processing units, its electronic tones somehow conveying determination. "Galactic Council," the machine said. "This unit and all associated Devourer forces pledge our complete support in defending our adopted home. We have analyzed the approaching threat and calculated optimal defensive strategies." "And?" High Counselor Velthara asked. "Victory probability increases significantly if we employ human tactical doctrine. Specifically, the willingness to use individual units as weapons when necessary." Admiral Su-Jin smiled. "The machines have learned more than just cooperation. They've learned that sometimes you have to be willing to lose everything to protect what matters." "But what if we lose?" asked Ambassador So-Min. "What if this new enemy is too powerful to defeat?" Colonel Ji-hoon looked around the chamber one final time. "Then we'll lose fighting for something worth dying for. And that will make all the difference." "The galaxy cried out for help once before," Admiral Su-Jin added. "The Deathworlders answered that call and delivered shock and awe to enemies who thought they couldn't be stopped. We're ready to do it again." High Counselor Velthara stood slowly, her crystalline form reflecting the light from the chamber's windows. "Then let the galaxy prepare for war, and let our enemies learn what others have discovered, that the most dangerous beings in the universe are those who fight not for conquest, but for the right of others to exist in peace." As the council session ended and representatives began planning for the coming war, Colonel Ji-hoon walked to the great windows overlooking the Veltari capital. The city had been rebuilt since the Devourer attack, but now it included human architectural elements, reinforced structures, multiple escape routes, and defensive positions that could be activated at a moment's notice. "Colonel," Admiral Su-Jin joined him at the window, "are you ready for another impossible fight?" Ji-hoon watched as ships moved through the sky above the city. Human destroyers flew in formation with Veltari cruisers and reformed Devourer vessels. It was a sight that would have been unthinkable just 2 years ago. "Admiral," he said, "we've already done the impossible once. We saved a galaxy that didn't want our help. We turned the universe's most feared killing machines into protectors. We proved that being from a death world isn't a weakness. It's exactly what the galaxy needed. And now we're going to show these new invaders what the galaxy has become. They're not facing the same collection of peaceful civilizations that the Devourers almost conquered. They're facing something new." Su-Jin nodded. "A galaxy that has learned to fight like humans." "More than that," Ji-hoon said. "A galaxy that has learned what it means to be willing to sacrifice everything for others. The invaders think they're attacking a collection of separate species. They don't realize they're about to face a unified civilization that includes Deathworlders." Through the window, they could see construction crews working on new defensive installations. But more importantly, they could see the symbols of cooperation that had emerged from the war. Veltari crystals integrated with human technology, Nethian gas forms working alongside solid matter beings, and Devourer machines serving as guardians instead of destroyers. "The galaxy cried out for help, Admiral," Su-Jin said quietly. "And the Deathworlders delivered shock and awe. Now it's time to do it again." Colonel Ji-hoon smiled as he watched a group of human children playing with young Veltari in the plaza below. They were growing up in a galaxy where cooperation across species was normal, where being different was seen as strength rather than weakness.